I, know- I spoke at the last merging leader. Were you guys setting those up yet, or did you need us again? Or?
Hey, Natalie. All right. It's 11 on the dot, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you guys for attending the 2021 Black Ink Book Festival. The panel that we're currently in is The Right Path to Marketing for Your Project. In this panel, we will discuss the different paths to publishing and why knowing them can help authors pivot and extend their careers. I'm really excited to have this panel of people with me here today. We're going to start from the top. We have New York Times and USA bestselling author Nancy Redd, who's also the American Library Association Award winner for the picture book Bedtime Bonnet. We have poet, graphic designer, musician Marcus Amaker, who is a former Black Ink Festival keynote speaker and the current poet laureate for the city of Charleston. Ms. Saritza Hernandez, lover of storytelling, coffee, and all things Star Trek. She is a literary agent at the Andrea Brown Agency. And last but not least, we have Ms. Wendy Coakley-Thompson, author, radio host, podcaster, and current president of Duho Books, a publisher of fiction and nonfiction for, by, and about the Bahamas and Bahamians. So welcome, everyone.
Happy to be here.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to talk to you guys, especially about publishing. For a lot of writers, we tend to look at social media and we just see people popping up with books and we have no idea on how to get there. So I'd like to start the conversation with what made you choose your initial path as far as publishing, and we'll go from there. And that is for anyone.
I'm happy to start because I've published in multiple ways, and I think what you should do when you're looking at your book is think about what the end goal is. So if the book that you're writing is because you have a burning story in your soul and you just cannot live until you get it out, well, you're in luck because you have a lot of options for that. For me, I started writing nonfiction books as a way to advance my career. I wanted to be in television, and I was fortunate that I had a really good mentor who very early on said, if you want to have a television career, you need to have a niche. You need to have something that people can call on to as an expert. So I started writing books about the female body because that was something that was very important to me. So for me, I needed to be, at that time in particular, traditionally published by a mainstream publisher. So that's why I took that path. But there have been other books I've written that I just wanted to get the story out. And I have self-published them under a pseudonym just because I wanted to get the story out. I didn't want to go through the rigmarole. So I think when you're thinking about the personally, and everyone else can jump in too, when you're thinking about the path for you, whether it's traditional publishing or self-publishing or just writing it on your computer screen and PDFing it and sending it to your friends, just think about the psychological background behind it. Is it because you want to advance your career? Is it because you just want to get the story out? Or is it because you just want to share it with a few certain people?
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And to go off of that, I think knowing that end goal is very important. For me, it's the most important thing for me is just to be able to have it out there, no matter how it gets out. So when I was in high school, I actually went to like Kinko's or something and just printed up a whole bunch of books or poems and gave them to friends and had drawings on it and things like that. And that was successful for me. But then as I got older, I realized that there are tools out there to sort of keep doing that in that spirit, but have it look a little bit more professional. So the self-publishing route has always been wonderful for me because I don't know. In my mind, you only die once, and like traditional publishing takes a long time. But like it has taken a long time for me. I'm not going to speak for everyone else. So for me, the fact that I publish so much and I write so much, by the time a traditional publisher gets my book, I might already be on like 58 new poems, So it's just important for me to have that access and that quick access to people. So self-publishing really worked and it really works for me, especially from a financial standpoint as well. And that's just something that I tell a lot of students about. I'm just like, if you want to get your work out there, there's a lot of ways to do it, and a lot of ways to do it quickly if you wanted to do that. So that end goal and that definition of success for me has always been just having a product, and it doesn't really matter how it got to the people, as long as there is a way to get it out to people.
I'll jump in here. So I guess I did the 360 because I didn't really have an end goal. I just had a dream. I've always wanted to write, and I'm American, but I grew up in the Bahamas, and I found that there was such a dearth of, Bahamian characters or people from the West Indies other than Jamaica. People still roll up and they're like, I remember when the hurricane hit Barbuda and people were like, oh my God, Wendy, how's your family? Like, they're fine. So I heard a hurricane hit Barbuda. I'm like, no, Bahamas. So we've, Bahamians and people of Bahamian descent always had this identity crisis, But so when it came time to publish, I did the whole find an agent, as Marcus said, I did the whole, and people were not receptive. So around this time, self-publishing I guess we were rediscovered, like where Black writers are albino tigers in the wild. Every once in a while you see one, you're like, oh my God, I've discovered you. Like, we've been here all a while, So I self-published my first book, Back to Life. And I'm a Delta. So, Deltas had a
Founders Day.
Thank you. So we had our convention in Atlanta. This is 2002, and they invited me to the office pavilion. I was like, oh, the office pavilion. So I had my little table and I set up my book, and someone, she literally rolled up on me and she said, who you published with? I said, I published myself. And she said, I have a friend who's an agent. And I was like, whatever. Sorry, Saritza.
It's all good.
So she said, I'll give you her information. I was like, okay, whatever. So I took her information, and, after I got back from the office pavilion, I came home and I said, well, let me holler at her and see, and then I found out she went to Syracuse and I'm an Orange woman. So I was like, okay, she can't be all that bad. So I sent her my stuff. I was very skeptical because I'd been so rebuffed. And she was able to get me a 2-book deal with Kensington. So I went from self-publishing, and that became a tool to go to the mainstream. And, this is when I was introduced to the business end of publishing, because, you, as Nancy said, you have a story, you want to get it out there, you want to share, but publishing is a business. So I found that really the business end was very restrictive. Now, things may have changed, but my book was published, the first one was published in 2004. So this was before Facebook, Twitter, So when my option was not renewed, I went back to self-publishing. But I always wanted to control the business end. So this is why I founded, I'm skipping ahead a lot, Duho Books, because I really found that people still don't have I don't want to say an interest, but, beyond I go to Sandals or I, go to Junkanoo Carnival, people I felt still had this blind spot when it came to a country, the Bahamas, which is 45 minutes by plane from Miami. So this was the impetus of Duho Books. I say the books are for, by, and about Bahamians, but, anyone else can read them if they must, So that's my pet project. And I'm finding out that the business end is very hard. I'm finding that I may want to do the Amanda Hawking route. You remember her, right? She did all the stuff on her own, and it reminds me of my aunt is from Norway, and she talks about apparently there's this Norwegian saying what it was like, now that you're cooked, like Marcus, now that you and Nancy, now that you've done the work, but everyone wants to eat now. But when you're raw, nobody wants to. So that has been my experience. You do the initial legwork yourself, and then, publishing becomes like Biggie. They creep up from behind once you.
I think we can all agree it's a lot of work, no matter which way you go. The thing is, that's the fallacy.
Yes.
It's a lot of work on the back end, on the front end, and the middle end. It's work.
The top end, the bottom end.
Yeah.
And people think that, oh, I've published, I have arrived. I'm like, no, you gotta, grind and hustle and flow just as you did when you were a self-published author. So that's my story. That's the clip notes, if you can believe that. So
Yeah, and I'll jump in and say that, from the literary agent side. So I have clients who self-publish. I have clients who traditionally publish only, and then I have those that I call my hybrid authors that have, both. We pick projects that we think are going to be better for self-publishing, or that we think would go where wider in a traditional market sense. But we talk about that in the business aspect of the conversation, because I think sometimes writers forget that you're a writer always. You're the minute you get up in the morning and you've got a song in your heart, you've got a poem in your mind, you've got a prose story to tell, you're a writer, and you sit down and write it, you're a writer. The minute you transition that writing into a business model to, generate an income, now you're transitioning from a writer to an author. And you don't have to be published to be an author yet, but you do have to have the mindset of an author. And I think that comes with thinking about, well, how do I get my product out to other people so that they can, enjoy it and I can make some money off of it, because bills are going to come no matter what. Like, rent's got to be paid, electricity's got to be paid, somebody's got to pay for all of that, research you've been doing. So the idea of a traditionally published book may sound like that's the best way to make big money, because you hear about all these books getting big deals, but then it may not be the right path for your work or for you. So that's a good conversation to have with someone who's already gone through the process of publishing, which is why I encourage authors to communicate and honestly, have conversations about, and I love that we're having this conversation here today about why I chose the path that I chose, and why I chose it for this particular project or for all of my projects. Because the other conversation that is not happening in publishing, that I'm glad we are having it, and we're butting up against them all the time about it right now and putting it in their face, is the fact that people of color have been writing forever. Black authors have existed forever, but you did not look to that market. You did not look to those authors because you were assuming that a certain group of people only buy a certain group of books. And that is evidenced not true. Like, people buy books. If they like the story, they're going to read it. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to share it. They're going to tell other people about it. It's going to hit the New York Times bestseller list. Angie Thomas is going to remain on the New York Times bestseller list for 220 weeks. So clearly people are buying the books and there's a market for it. So you have to think as an author, what is my business model for my writing? And that determines then which way you want to go. Is it going to be a project that I self-publish, or is it going to be a project that I traditionally publish?
Wow. I love that. I love that. I'm sorry. I'm just like soaking it all in.
I think we all can agree that like the number one advice that relates to all of this is just write the book. Just write it. Literally. You can't. I always say, like, the only thing that stands between you and being an author is just writing the book. You can talk all about, maybe I want to be self-published, maybe I want to be traditionally published, maybe I just want to PDF it. Like, but you just have to write it first. And I think it's easy to get caught up in the details when, if you write it, amazing things can happen, but nothing can happen if you don't write it.
And sell a blank page.
Yeah, and I would.
Amen.
And I would say, like,
I have found that in working with. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marcus.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Wendy.
I found that with duho authors, like I worked with this one person, and I'm not going to call any names, and he was like, well, we're going to have this marketing plan, and I'm going to go to Paris, and I'm like, okay, so when am I going to get your photos? So it became this pitch battle. it's like you have to have the baby before you talk about where they're going to go to college. You have to have the product. And, artists kind of, there's so much ideating that they don't realize that, we cannot do anything for you until we have it. We need it. So, yes, I agree, Nancy.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that oftentimes writing the book is the most rewarding part of the whole experience for me, like being in the process of writing something, knowing what the project is going to look like, poems coming to me, whatever energy is coming to me within that project is usually the part of all of this that I enjoy the most. And publishing, of course, has the business side of it, and that can be a headache. I mean, we have taxes about to happen right now, and I'm looking back on last year, and I'm like, wow, I have some work to do, but definitely, yeah, just writing the book is the most important thing. And there are a lot of options and a lot of resources out there for people to figure out how to get it out.
Mm-hmm. True.
That's what I was gonna ask about the different. A couple of you mentioned that there are several ways to get your book out there. Like, what have been some of the best ways for you in your journey as far as like getting your things?
Well, for me, I found both traditional and I found that the self-publishing for me, I am the master of my own fate. Whether I rise or fall depends on me. But when I, dare I say, pricked my finger and signed in blood the book contract, the thing that I felt was the benefit for me was the distribution. They send out, authors advanced reader copies. And so there's a machine behind the publishing house that, you cannot replicate as an individual. So I think that was really the benefit for me. And I did reap the benefits of that. And it helped me get a name out. So when I returned to self-publishing, people would say, oh, I've read da-da-da-da, and I'll try this book, So I found that I was able to move more copies of a self-published book because of that name recognition that the massive distribution from the mainstream publisher was able to bring me. Not many, but, respectable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed self-publishing just because of being able to control the narrative. I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. And that part for me, I think it's just my personality, just not trusting major publishers to really deeply understand what it's like to be a Black poet. And that's just, the experience that I've had. But it's always, it's fun for me when a book is released that I put out. Like, for instance, this last book that I did, I actually sent copies to every Black-owned bookstore that I could find, so all around the country. And some of them picked it up, and I just wrote a note in there just being like, hey, like, this is for you. This is, in solidarity of the work that you do. And not to say that you can't do that under a traditional publisher, but it's just, it is a lot of fun to be able to control the narrative that way. And I think as artists, we need to talk about the business side more. And so self-publishing for me, obviously if Random House calls tomorrow, I'm going to answer the phone. But self-publishing for me, it's important that I have a direct line to fans that, somebody buys a book and it's going through like 3 other places before the money gets to me, and so it's for me, I really enjoy the direct line to fans. So, but yeah, I mean, and that's just been my experience. I've had poems in traditionally published books like anthologies and things. So, I mean, it's not like I'm not open to a traditional publisher, but self-publishing does have a lot of of benefits to it. And as a designer too, you can design your book.
That's true. That's like,
if I may, what I have found, this came up with remember the publishing paid me hashtag, and now publishing is having their own reckoning, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that part of the business end, and I think Saritza, you talked about this. It really turned me off because I found that there was such a lack of imagination in placing us as authors of color. Someone joked that you could go to remember they had the African American section in any chain bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and you would see, they said you would have Zane, you would have Maya Angelou, you'd have the brother who sequenced the genome if he was Black, So I do find that there's this limiting perspective, there's a desire to place us all into this box. Now, I have deliberately went la 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 when it came to traditional publishing. I don't just subscribe to Publishers Marketplace, or I dropped all that stuff because the business end has been depressing. But it's interesting to hear these new developments where authors are pushing back. I mean, that brother who said publishing paid me and just opened the floodgates. And I found that, and white authors were like, you mean I got this for my book and the great Roxane Gay got $1,500 advance,
Mm-hmm.
So people, I think it opened the conversation up to whether or not we appreciate it. Now, whether that bears some fruit remains to be seen,
Well, I think that we're in a... Oh, apologies.
No.
I was going to delay. I'm sorry. I thought there was but
a lot of
the cool thing is...
Paid. Go ahead.
Apologies. I think my internet is weird. I thought there was
I felt the lag too, and then it crossed over, so it's okay.
So what I think is great about what you just said, though, I have been in publishing since 2004, which we've been in publishing at the same time, and so what I think is interesting is how much it is totally changed. I mean, it's like the stock market. You cannot look at the day-to-day up and down. You have to look at the trajectory and trends. And it's never been a better time to be a person of color or an underrepresented individual in publishing, because you've got two things. You've got which is the big thing, which is the publisher's interest in expanding, but also the readers. Because I've always had very supportive publishers. It was interesting. The problem is it is a business, right? And so the readers had a hard time grappling with, I should be reading more diverse books. My very first book, Body Drama, had a multicultural cover of all ethnicities of young women on the cover. And center of it was a Black woman. Due to this, many people thought, because I'm a Black author, and there's a Black woman on the cover, despite there being multiple white people and Asian people and Latina people. There's it's a book for Black girls. Okay, so we've come so far. You can have, in my last book had a multicultural cover. No one was like, "Oh, it's a book for Black girls." So we're in a great position for this new generation of people who, I'm assuming, if you're watching this, you want to become an author in some way, shape, or form. It's never been a better time to share your specific story, because no one is expecting you to lessen yourself to fit into an ideal. Do you guys agree? I feel like people are really interested in the truth these days.
Yeah.
So publishing has become more woke. Is that what you're?
And readers have become more woke, more diverse. It used to be. I feel like people had a niche that they would read, and now people are like, I'm interested in your story.
And you know what? A lot of it is that reckoning we were talking about, the reckoning of publishing. And it's because we're also holding publishers accountable for their sales teams. Their sales teams are the ones who guide the direction of the booksellers to place the books where they're going to place them. If the sales team isn't going to sell the Black book, then the Black indie bookstore isn't going to know that book exists. They're just not going to know. They might know because they now, with 2020, 2021, the ability of technology and social media and all of these amazing opportunities that we have to find authors. But the large, Barnes and Noble, Targets, Walmarts of the world, they're not going to know that. It's just another product that's coming through their line, right? It's the sales team's responsibility to make sure that they market that book properly, that they sell that book properly to the bookstores. So Publishing Paid Me also brought to light how the sales teams at the publishing houses were predominantly white, older men who are still, employed and still working and still selling the books that, the classics. So yeah, we're going to sell Toni Morrison, but we're not going to sell L.L. McKinney, who started the whole Publishing Paid Me thing. So it's that conversation now shifting. And the fact that, we have now more agencies, literary agencies, calling for more mentorship programs that allow people of color to come into this side of the table with the authors, so that now you have a representative who can connect to your story. And if we're going to be the gatekeepers in any way, shape, or form for publishing, then we can open the gates to more marginalized communities. Because that was the other problem too. It's like, if you wanted someone to read your book, you were most likely going to be sending it, even in 2004, to the vast majority of literary agents being white. And, as much as I would like to say that I can connect with every story, it's not possible. As a Latina, I'm not even going to connect with every Latin story. It's just the way it works. And just because you're Black doesn't mean you connect with every Black story, but it does give you a better understanding. And it does allow you to be able to say, no, this is why this story is relevant, important, why readers are looking for it. It's changing, but it still needs a lot of work.
So what did you think of, what was her name? Was it Lenore Cuff? The one who wrote the book about, is it American Dirt?
American Dirt. Oh, girl, that's a whole conversation we could have.
Okay.
No, my thing is, no, I was not happy with American Dirt. Should not have happened.
If anyone who's watching this doesn't know what American Dirt is, it was essentially someone co-opting a story. And I think what's interesting now, we've had enough of these co-opting of stories that it's so important that everyone write their own story. So there cannot be an excuse, well, I just felt the story needs to be told. The story has been told. The story shall be told by individuals who actually experience the story, which is why, what you do at Duo is so important. You saw a hole. You were like, there's not enough Bahamian literature. I'm going to fill this hole. Wendy is a great role model, y'all.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, we talk a lot about giving the reckoning to publishing of what they're lacking. But the great thing about it is that we're seeing people like Wendy, we're seeing people who are seeing a need, filling it, and saying, you know what, let me help you. I'm going to, one of the best metaphors I've seen for helping people the way you should is if you get a leg up on something and you get on an elevator, send the elevator back down for the next person. Don't just hold it open for no one else to get there. Let somebody else come on. And so having other opportunities like this, having people be able to talk openly about their situation, about their experience with publishing, and then creating an opportunity for those that you see publishing isn't creating the opportunity for is brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, I think that, I came into publishing so starry-eyed. I thought, I've arrived. You see these stories of the author in Manhattan with this fabulous apartment and the furry slippers and the cigarette holder. I think if anything, I would like for folks to kind of know what they're getting into and how you can see around corners and navigate. I was thankful in that, the great Marie Brown, I was with her agency. So, she had, and Janelle Walden-Odgeman was my agent. So, they filtered the publishing experience through the prism of being people of color in this industry. So that wasn't the issue. I found that people didn't know what to make of authors of color, in particularly since, Toni Morrison and Terry McMillan and all these people kind of broke ground, So I'm very pleased to see that there's this renaissance with, we've been discovered again. But also, too, I'm very pleased that people are more open with what publishing has paid them. I mean, this has been such a secret. Don't tell anyone your advance, or if you got one, indeed. So I'm very heartened to see this new openness. Yeah, you can acquire all you want, but the pay equity is what I'm very pleased to see is coming out of this reckoning.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, sorry, it's so much good information. I'm just like, I feel like the kid at a candy store just soaking it all in. But with this new renaissance and the era of social media, with us being in COVID, a lot of things are going virtual, and I think like people in the literary world have a lot more access to each other. So where do we see this publishing, writing industry moving towards, and how can we all be better participants in it?
Do you mean toward where are they moving to connect with readers, or
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I can only speak for where I am and where I can see the. There's a lot of conversation on Twitter. Publishing is on Twitter. I will tell you this: they're on Twitter more than anything else. And with editors being, working from home and spending a lot more time away from their offices, they are being more open and candid about their experiences within the industry and talking about what are they looking for, and they're connecting directly with readers in this regard, as well as with other authors. So I think publishing is starting to see, traditional publishing is starting to see that the connection that self-publishers have had for a long time with readers and directly connecting to them in their spaces has been something that they have to do themselves, and enhance that conversation by including more people, not just in the decision making, because the decision making has to happen, but also this is what the readers are clamoring for. This is, we know that these stories are being told in digital media, in TV, and in TikTok. Why aren't we doing something like that? And so I think publishing is starting to see that, along with the renaissance of publishing, they're also having another digital renaissance as well. Like, they're starting to see other areas where they can connect and understand also what their failings have been. We were counting on the sales team to tell us that you can't sell this gay book with a Black man on the cover in the heartland because they won't buy it. And then suddenly you see, Queer Eye is happening in Missouri. It's like, clearly there's a disconnect here between your sales team, and so those kinds of conversations. I think publishing is moving there. I think that they're also starting to see that there is no one way to be successful in publishing. It's not that, I no longer have to worry about people telling me, oh, I didn't want to tell you that I self-published my book because I didn't want to lose out on having an agent. I want to know that you self-publish. And the only reason I want to know how many units you sold is so that I have an idea of how long you've been doing this. If you told me that, I just self-published my book and I've only sold 3 copies, well, just then in that word means like very recently, I would hope, not, 20 years ago, and you've not done anything with it, right? It's a different way to communicate. And publishing is seeing that as well, that they're changing that.
Yeah, and I would say that with like anything that has traditional in front of it, it all, one, needs to be torn down, but two, it's good that publishing is learning, just like with the music industry and anything else, that there are so many other ways to get product out. And really, when artists and writers, when we start to really realize that we have the power in all of this, then hopefully traditional publishing will shift, to all of the trends. I mean, I remember working in newspapers, and when Twitter first came, there was a pushback from newspapers being like, well, like people are going to go to Twitter for news instead of newspapers, like, and just thinking that it was basically the end of the world. And I was like, no, you have to like adapt. And getting back to your question, I think that that's what is happening right now in COVID world, is that a lot of people have had to adapt to what that means right now, but also realizing, hey, like this is another cliff that we can jump off of, and there's actually a place to land, and we're all fine. But I also love this era, realizing how much power our artists have. I mean, there are some poets who are just posting stuff on Instagram, and there are ways for them to monetize that. So like there are so many different ways to, the definition of being a published, author, being a poet has just changed just in the 200 years that I feel like I've been on this earth. Like it's just changed so much over time. And I think that is a good thing. And I'm kind of excited to see where it goes, unless it's on TikTok, because I'm not going to.
You end up on TikTok, Marcus. You just don't know.
I'm sorry.
Don't know. That may be your clip.
Record this. Like I'm not going to be on. Might be the next thing, but not on TikTok.
I don't know. Never say never. But
Yeah.
I do have a question, though. We're seeing all of this consolidation of publishing houses. The big six has become the big four. Does that mean that there's less of a market for us, or does that mean that they people are being subsumed, but the same people are at these houses looking for authors to publish? I'm thinking about this is the same thing with media consolidation. How much leverage. This is something I would say I lie awake at night about, but it's like, really, another one? I feel like DJ Khaled and another one, So this is definitely, I'm trying to wrap my mind around how that works now. Is it a lesser market for us, or is it just, I own two houses now,
I can speak to that a little bit. Not
okay.
I don't know all the inner workings of the publishing houses because that's not my job. I know enough about the industry and about what has happened to say that things like when Penguin and Random merged, and now you have Penguin Random House, the two houses kind of merged under one umbrella, but we're kind of still working, and to this day are still working a little bit, separate of each other. So agents can pitch works to both Penguin and Random House editors, and they can compete against each other as long as there's like a third party that's outside of Penguin Random House in an auction, if it went to go into an auction. But and that's also the case in other houses that have merged. And now with Simon and Schuster and being merged in there as well, we're assuming that the way that Penguin and Random did, they're going to do with Simon and Schuster. What I have seen change that has been very interesting. It's one of, like Nancy said earlier, it's, if you watch it every day, you don't see the change, but like you go off it for like a couple of weeks and you come back and you're like, oh, hey, look at that change. That looked good. It was the departments. You've got some editorial directors who are being promoted from senior editors who are people of color, who are now in a position to make change because they are the decision maker. They are also the decision maker with the purse strings. So they can bid high on that book by a Black author that they couldn't have, and that they, tried at the acquisition meeting, but, didn't have that buying power before. So that's a change that's happening across the board. You can see that at Kensington as well. With Essie Soga now at the executive director position, she's affecting a lot of change there because of the types of books that she's interested in and in wanting to update. What Kensington can do. Mind you. The different houses also are at the mercy of their bigger conglomerates, right? So, all of publishing is owned by somebody else. So the biggest voice that I found in the industry right now has been the junior editors who have said, we need a higher pay so that we can continue to live here. And if not, you need to open the gates to New York from outside, because I can't afford to live here and still be in publishing. And COVID has done that, because now everybody's working from home, and you've got editors who've gone home to live with their parents, left the city, and are still working in the city, but they're in Minnesota, they're in California, and still getting the books done and still getting the work done. So a lot of changes have happened within just 2020. The whole reckoning that publishing has been incredible. I've always been excited to be a part of publishing, and I've been in publishing for over 15 years in different aspects of it, 10 of it being on this side of the table as an agent. And I was there when it first started with the whole digital, and ebooks being the bane of publishing, thinking the same way they talked about mass market paperback being the bane of publishing. And now we're seeing, to me, more change than we did then. And that was technology. And now we're actually seeing voice changes and actual, money, like big books getting sold. If you pick up, especially in the kidlit side and the children's bookshelf, you see more people of color on that shelf. It's much more diverse now than it ever has been. And I think that's fantastic. That means that now we got to push adult, to be like, hey, catch up, because your kid's catching up.
Wow.
We have 3 quick questions from our Q&A before we wrap up. The first one comes from Jordan. It says, how do authors manage book leaks, for lack of a better word, PDF files being uploaded onto the internet?
That would be probably a question for self-publishing. But I will say on the traditional side, you do have a team that is supposed to be on top of that. So you can go back to them and be like, why has this been leaked? And they are supposed to send DRM notices.
Well, I mean, does that really harm a book? Because remember, this was a big thing when Steve Harvey's book was leaked. And, I won't implicate anyone, but, some folk in the islands, you get the PDF, but I think that I got the PDF of In the Room Where It Happens and Fear, and that still didn't harm the sales. I think some people look at it as, you get that free CD, the complimentary CD, and it builds word of mouth, So I don't really sweat it. Because I think it's inevitable, people are going to steal and cheat and bootleg, but I just think it's the price of doing business, sadly. And as an independent publisher, I can't do anything about it.
I can't do anything about it. I think a lot of my books, especially the nonfiction books, have PDFs because I get the little Google alerts, like this random site, and I'm just like, okay. But you have to think about it. The person who's going to get the PDF or steal it or whatever was never going to buy it in the first place. But maybe they will talk positively about it to individuals who would never, on their worst day, steal a book. So I think to help you sleep at night, don't worry about it as affecting sales, because people who steal books don't buy books. Like, that's not how this works. And so you'd look at it as like, well, you could show that as the popularity of your book and encourage you. Your book has been stolen by people who otherwise wouldn't read. You're doing the community a service, y'all. You're encouraging folks to read, because you can't. Like, the thing is, you cannot, in publishing, you cannot control anything but yourself. As an author, a lot of this conversation we're talking about has nothing to do with your possible trajectory as an author. All you can literally do is write and keep pushing that book. Write and push it. Hustle and write and hustle.
Hustle and write. I like that.
I like that. I'm just writing it down.
I'm feeling that.
Let's see. Our next question comes from a Facebook Live viewer. Hi, Facebooks. Is there any one roadmap to becoming an agent?
There is not one roadmap. Agents come from all different backgrounds. I will say, be wary of schmeagens. Those are agents that are a little shady. And those are the ones that weren't here. You've never heard of them before, and all of a sudden pop up some store and want all these manuscripts. That's a problem. But I would say the best way for someone who's interested in becoming a literary agent is to reach out to agencies whose works and whose clients you admire and books that you like to read, and ask if they have any paid internship opportunities or even temporary unpaid internships, like a 6-week kind of internship where you just get a sense of what it means to be an agent. You'll go through queries, you'll get to talk with all of the agents, see what their lists are like. It's not enough in a 6-week course, but it at least gives you an insight. Is this something I want to do? Then look for internships that'll give you longer period of time, and do the work. You do a lot of reading. You do want to make sure that the agencies that you work with have longevity. In other words, they've been around for 10, 20 years, because that means that not only have they established the rapport that they need with the industry, with the publishers and the influencers and the decision makers, but they also are putting out quality work that you want to be a part of.
And our last question comes from Prophetess, who says, can we talk about copywriting if you post things on your Instagram? I don't know if anybody knows about that. I'm always very lost in the sauce on that one.
Yeah, I don't, I was, some friends of my muscles supple. I've kind of gotten into these sites, like there's a raving Barbie site on Instagram, and you fall into this K-hole, and apparently theft of their content is a thing. So I don't know if there's a copyright per se, but there seems to be this informal shaming culture where people insert their tag, if you will. They tag their graphics, and they can find their pictures online and see if people have been doing that. So it seems to be there's this informal cleansing of folk who are inclined to steal your stuff, but I don't really think there's a formal mechanism for snatching someone who steals your stuff on Instagram. So I'm sorry I couldn't be of more help there.
No, I'm always a little bit lost as far as Instagram goes, because Instagram kind of has its own rules.
That's true. They're part of Facebook, so
yeah, and it's like a lot of things online, just like YouTube. People could literally be sued almost like every minute on YouTube because they're posting stuff they shouldn't be, doing. And according to the fine print, you could get sued for that stuff. So when it comes to posting things on Instagram, I know that used to be a fear of mine that stopped me from sharing. But then, you realize once you create something, you own a copyright to it. If you have an LLC, which we can talk about later, but it's like, you have protections to sue people about that. But that rarely, at least in my experience, has been an issue. And there's a lot of people that just share and just kind of just put it out there. I mean, it might not be the most professional way to do it, but it seems to work, so.
Completely. I'm looking at the time. But it's been such a good conversation. I want to thank all of our panelists for your expertise. In the lounge area, there's going to be a table with this panel's name on it. If you'd like to continue the conversation, a few of our panelists will be there for a short period of time for you to communicate with them. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. I learned so much personally. I've got Hustle and Write. I'm going to write it on my mirror. That's going to be for all 2021. So everyone enjoyed the rest of the festival, and keep supporting Black Ink Charleston.
All right.
Thank you.
All you do to organize.
Thanks. Good to meet everyone.
Yeah. See y'all.
So we click on reception.